Hello, and welcome to another episode of our Scaling Impact Conversations. My name is Alden Zecca. I'm a founding partner here at We Scale Impact, your hosts for these conversations. And this chat series is all about learning how to scale and, more importantly, the impact that scale can have for social enterprises, whether for profit or nonprofit. And if you've seen some of our previous episodes, you know that we've been speaking with funders, we've been speaking with innovators, and today we're going to be speaking with the founder and CEO of an accelerator, so someone in between, a bit of a service provider support organization. I'm very pleased to welcome today my friend and someone I've known for many years now, Wilfred Njagi. He's the founder and CEO of Vilgro Africa. He's based in Nairobi, but they have presence across the continent, and they continue to expand their services as well throughout all of Africa. Welcome, Wilfred. Why don't you give a little bit of a self-introduction of your own background and also about Vilgro Africa, and then we'll get into our discussion and conversation.
Thanks, Alden, for having me. This is a true pleasure being able to chat to you today. As you said, my name is Wilfred Njagi, co-founder, CEO of Vilgro Africa, and we are a healthcare-based incubator operating out of Nairobi, serving East Africa, and increasingly we are now expanding to parts of West Africa and southern parts of Africa through partnering with other incubators. Vilgro has its origins in India, where it started about 21 years ago. And in India, we have multiple sector focus. And it was in 2014 that the founder of Vilgro, Paul, basically decided to share what had worked in terms of a model for incubating social enterprises. And he wanted to share that with the rest of the developing world. So that's how I ended up there, spent 1 year with him, and I was lucky to be tasked with the assignment of expanding to Africa. We now also have Vilgro in the Philippines and Vilgro USA as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Wilfred. That's very helpful to understand. You know, one thing that might help people understand before we jump into some of our questions, a little bit more background on Vilgro Africa. You mentioned that you're based in Nairobi, but you're beginning to expand more and more into West Africa. And I know that the ultimate vision is to expand continent-wide. Can you give an idea of how long has Vilgro Africa been in Kenya, in Nairobi, where you're headquartered? And also, you know, how many innovators have you put through your incubator since founding? Approximately, I don't need an exact number, but just to give people an idea of scale.
Yeah, so we have worked with we've worked for 6 years now, since 2015, and we've supported close to 40 companies to date. And that means we've reviewed at least 500 applications for us to be able to select 40. Out of these 40, we funded about 20 to 30 of them have gotten direct seed funding from us, where we give ticket sizes of between $20,000 per company. And when we did our 5-year impact report last year, we were surprised to learn that we'd actually touched 2 million lives in East Africa, and our companies had made revenues of $2.2 million. So that's the kind of scale that we talk about here.
That's great. Thanks, Wilfred. That's very helpful. So, you know, that way the audience just has an idea when we're talking about the works that you've been doing there. The question I'd like to start with, Wilfred, and we start with this with every conversation that we have as the series is, when we talk about achieving scale and growing scale and impact, those terms mean very different things for different organizations, for different individuals, even sometimes in the same organization. What does scale and impact, or what do scale and impact mean for Vilgro Africa? And maybe you can answer that in two different ways, because there may be different answers. One is for Vilgro Africa itself, for its own scale and its own impact. And then also, how do you think about scale and impact for the innovators that you work with? Because I think that, you know, the definitions may be slightly different. They may not be. Please go ahead.
Yeah. And even before I answer that, I think it's important to answer the question, why do we need to scale, right? Why don't we
please.
More, do our own little nice thing? I think if you are all about impact, it means that you have to scale, because You can't achieve impact if you're just touching a few hundred lives. I mean, you're impacting those, but when we talk about impact in the social enterprise world, we're talking about hitting a critical mass and having this irreversible change that is almost cross-cutting. So you need to be aiming for at least millions of lives touched. So that's the scale we want our companies to achieve. Each company we support has to have potential to touch at least 100,000 lives to 1,000,000 lives. That's the kind of magnitude for our companies. For us as Vilgro, I think the number we were looking at is we want to touch 10 million lives in the next 3 to 5 years. Since we've touched 2 million lives in the previous 5 years, I think we can do 5x of that and touch 10 million lives in the next 5 years. And by 2030, the number we are looking at is 30 million lives impacted by 2030 in Africa as we expand. That's very different from what Vilgro in India would think about scale. Again, a geography with 1.3 billion people, for them, 1,000,000 lives is not scale, right? In a country as huge as India or China, for example, 1,000,000 lives is barely nothing. You've just scratched the surface. So I think scale also differs with this context, the geographies from one geography to another, and also the type of the business model. Yeah, but for us, as we purely work with healthcare, the number of things we look at is like, for example, a diagnostic company will look at how many tests have they done, right? Number of laboratory tests, number of clinics that they serve. We also look at sales as a proxy, right? You know, sales and revenues is a good proxy of impact. If it's a healthcare, if it's a clinic, we look at lives, I mean, patients, number of walk-in patients, number of patients served in a year. If it's a maternal neonatal innovation, you'd look at number of deliveries, number of babies. So we define these impact metrics when we onboard a company. Just before they sign the incubation agreement, we say, what are the things that are important for us that we'll be tracking month on month? We do that meticulously every month. We have what we call monthly incubation report, MIR, which is basically a large spreadsheet that has financial indicators, but also the social impact indicators that you're tracking month on month. And then you can compile that at the end of the year or at the end of the program and see how well did you do in terms of scale and in terms of touching lives. Yeah.
That's great. So clearly for you at Vilgro Africa, but also for the companies, the organizations you work with, it's clear that impacting lives is by far the #1 metric you're driving at.
Correct.
Let me ask a clarifying question, because some of our audience members may not be clear on this, is does Vilgro work with, or Vilgro Africa, let me be clear, does Vilgro Africa work with both for-profit and nonprofit organizations, or only for-profit organizations?
We work with only for-profit organizations. These are companies that could be and should be able to raise return-seeking capital after we funded them, right? So it's very important that is a pure business that can achieve scale, can achieve exits, and even can consider buyouts and other things. So yeah, it has to be a purely for-profit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful to understand just for our audience members, because they may not be aware of that situation. Another question that I'll anticipate some audience members might have is, do you only work with organizations that are based in Africa, or what about organizations based elsewhere but that are trying to do work in Africa and maybe setting up a regional office or a regional hub? Would they be eligible for application to Vilgro Africa?
Yeah, you're right. So we have two models. We have the co-incubation, where we are looking at companies domiciled in Africa trying to achieve impact here. But then we have more other global health companies, most of them in the global north. Just like you remember the program we did together with WeScale on SLab, Accelerating Saving Lives at Birth Innovations. There are all these global health innovations, all the way from Australia to Oxford to US, that solutions or coming up with solutions for developing countries or for low resource settings. And that means that even though the research and the innovator is based outside, there is potential for that innovation to have impact in the continent and in other developing world. Such innovators, we help them with market entry support. And because most of them can afford to pay, we actually do that for a fee. So it's mostly consultancy advisory, which then helps even with our sustainability. But the second thing is that as we do those assignments as consultants, we unearth a lot of new knowledge, insights that helps us now even support our main portfolio even better, right?
Sure.
For example, now we're working with one company that is coming up with an oxygen solution for low resource settings. And by doing that assignment, we've been able to map the entire oxygen ecosystem from not just oxygen, but all the way to how it's delivered to the patient and the equipments in between. And that has given us a lot of insights to be able to even support any other company in the continent that might be in the same space. So yeah, we are able to work with people who are based outside the continent.
That's great. Thanks for that example. That leads right into kind of the next topic I wanted to cover, which is, can you provide some specific examples of successful scaling approaches? And if you can cite company names or company details, that'd be great. But I recognize that for confidentiality, in some cases, maybe you can't do that, and that's okay. But where you can, it'd be helpful for our audience to hear specific examples of what has worked in terms of scaling. And again, from a Vilgro Africa perspective, we recognize that scaling means lives impacted, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what we've learned over the 5 years is that it's very hard to scale B2C. Purely you can use B2C for validation, initial validation, but you quickly need to ramp up that by working with aggregators and having things like B2B2C. Yeah, where if you're doing a microinsurance, then you're better off working with an aggregator who might be like a microfinance institution or a savings group that gives you access, one-stop shop access to 1,000, 200,000 users at the same time. We have what we call go-to-market partnerships that we keep crafting. We keep identifying who will be the good scaling partner for a certain innovation. And we have this partnership that we sign at the incubator level. And then through that partnership, we help the company scale. This can even be governments, NGOs. Like here, we have a very huge healthcare NGOs that will have access to more customers than you would have done by yourself. So we try to form those partnerships. I'll give you even in purely, it can either be government or NGO, but it can also just be purely B2B. And we have a good example of a graduate from a program, Turaco, which offers microinsurance. Recently, they entered into a partnership with Mcopa Solar, which gives pay-as-you-go solar solutions. And what they've done is, through that partnership, Mcopa was able to open up its network of customers. And recently, I saw on the news that they've now, through that partnership, touched 16,000 lives through just one go-to-market partnership. So you can imagine if you sign 10 of these, the number keeps growing. So that's what we've learned, that you have to work with aggregators, go-to-market partners, and you have to keep pursuing them. Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up on that Turaco Mcopa partnership? And you may not know all the details, but it's obvious the benefit to Turaco is to expand their reach, to get to new customers, the existing Mcopa customers. What was the motivation for Mcopa to sign that partnership agreement? And because often when we work with innovators here at We Scale Impact, it's clear what they want out of a partnership, what the innovator wants out of a partnership, but it's not always clear what the partner is getting. So maybe you can use that example and help our audience better understand that. What was Mcopa getting from this partnership?
I think, and I'm not private to all the details because they are a graduate of our program, but my guess would be value for their customers, right? Mcopa might have sat down and said, in addition to solar, how can we keep improving lives of our customers? Yeah, how can we even continue having that lifetime value of a customer once they've paid up for their solar? Then what next? What's the next layer of service or product you can give them? Yeah, so there's a clear value in the partnership for both parties. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. And you also cited that sometimes the partnership can be with an NGO or with government even. Can you give a more maybe specific example of either an NGO or governmental partnership that you've seen work for one of the companies that you've incubated?
Yeah, there's one company that does blood management services. That means mobilizing blood donors all the way to tracking the blood components and products up to transfusion and anything in between. And they were able to work with AMREF, which is the largest healthcare NGO in Africa, to be able to craft partnerships with county governments, because AMREF has a bigger say when it comes to working with county governments. They are much bigger brand, well known. They have other program areas that interlink very well with county governments. So when you go with such a partner, then counties are willing to listen to you. So it opens up all these doors, right? And the same can be said for Red Cross or any other big NGO that you think of, that if you are to go alone as Wilfred, then you get us a number of questions. But if you are going with this partner, because they've seen value from this partner before, so they are using that as a validation that we've worked with AMREF, we've seen value in the previous engagements, so that means even this one that they have brought to the table will be valuable to us, right? So that's an NGO example I would give.
Yeah, that's a great example. Thanks, Wilfred. And I completely agree with you. I mean, we actually have a training course at WeScale Impact that we've offered to innovators specifically around partnerships, the value of partnerships, how to think about entering them, and so on and so forth. And so I think that's great to hear that you've seen the same, which is, B2C is very difficult. It can be expensive. It can be wonderful as a pilot, as you said, as a testing ground to prove something, but that ultimately the B2C model is very difficult to scale because you have to then reach literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people directly, versus going through a partner, whether NGO, government, private sector, to be able to reach others in that way. So that's very helpful. Thank you. Let me change now. You are an incubator, and I say you being Vilgro Africa is an incubator. Obviously different than a direct funder, an investor, right? And also different than a service provider like WeScale Impact is. You're a little bit in between, if you will, where you, in some cases, are making investments into some of the companies that you incubate. And in other cases, you are supporting them and servicing them, helping them grow and scale. If innovators look, now taking it from the innovator view, if they look at funders and incubators and service providers, some of those are very, what I would call, conservative. They focus only on later stage, already proven, maybe in a for-profit model, revenue generating organizations. Others are much more risk-taking. They're working with organizations that may not even have any model yet, may not have any solution yet, and they're still just developing an idea. Where does Vilgro Africa fall on that spectrum? And as a follow-up to that, why has Vilgro Africa chosen that part of the spectrum, wherever it is, to focus on, rather than going earlier or later or whatever it may be?
Sorry, you cut out.
Oh, sure, no problem. Yeah, so I asked, where on the spectrum of working with innovators, are you working with very, very early stage innovators, idea stage as one extreme, or very late stage innovators, already proven, already established, have revenue and are growing? And the second question was, why has Vilgro Africa chosen to focus on whichever stage it's focusing on?
Yeah, so as an incubator, we are very early stage. We tend to be the first money in. There is no scenario where we invest in you if, for example, you've already raised like $500,000 before, right? So we only work with you at pre-seed and seed stage. But then there's also a balancing act so that we're able to pick hyper growth companies, even though we come in early. Like Turaco, we were among the first investors. Even Ilara Health, another example, we were in the first round that they raised, and that was a syndicate. So you can either be the only one coming in, or you can come as part of a round, but we want to be in the very first round. But then you're able to tell the trajectory that a company is likely to take based on the entrepreneur, right? So an entrepreneur was at a 3x exit before and is a serial entrepreneur. And then they're building something that is scalable, something that is maybe relies on mobile, internet. You can see quickly that this one is likely to take a very upward trajectory. While if you're supporting a company that is building a ventilator or a phototherapy machine, and you keep seeing these kind of hardware product-based companies, these ones take a while, right? Because you have to go through validation, regulatory approval, registration. So what we do is we try to strike a balance. All of them will be early stage, but then we're able to see which one has hyper growth potential and which one is likely to be more patient. Because at the end of the day, we still need to be able to report impact. So if we took all early stage, all product based, then a year later we won't be able to say how many lives were touched, right? So we need to, for that reason, we need to balance.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I get that. We have a question from the audience here about this topic, and it says, as a support of early stage innovation, do you see that even though startups are innovative and impactful, sometimes they find it difficult to then go to market? So can you comment on some of those go-to-market difficulties beyond just partnerships that you've already mentioned? But the fact is that innovators can struggle to get to the market, even if they have a wonderful idea, even if their innovation is very impactful and very value-adding, let's say. So beyond go-to-market partners, how else can innovators expand their ability to be successful?
Mm-hmm. And I think you've alluded to the answer there, that even if you're innovative, people struggle in two things. One is getting the product market fit, right? You might be very innovative, very good solution to a good problem. So you have the problem solution fit, but you haven't found a product market fit. That means a sweet spot where someone is willing to pay and even refer others to pay because they like the product and it's widely accepted in the market. And it could be price. There are other things that affect your scalability. It could be pricing. It could be the revenue model. You might find, for example, for equipments that are targeting small clinics, even though they need them, if you ask them to pay upfront, then you struggle. But if you were to convert that into a pay-as-you-go or a lease model, then the uptake goes up, right? It doesn't mean there was anything wrong with the innovation, but the business model around it is what needed to be thought through. Yeah? And there's this book by Moore that's called Crossing the Chasm, and it says that all of us have to go through that valley of death, right? You have people are very excited, early adopters, but then before you get into early majority, things are likely to fall through the cracks there because unless you find a very good product market fit and you are quickly able to navigate that. The other thing is funding, right? Mm-hmm. Very innovative solution. You don't have funding to take it to market because going to market sometimes is a push. You need to be marketing, you need to be doing different things, experimenting different models. You need to be willing to burn cash early. And as you've seen, most companies that have scaled, there's a place they are burning cash like crazy, and you can see how the runway is winding down. But then you need to continue putting the pedal on the gas until it takes off. So if you didn't have enough funding, then you might be dead in the water in a few. So those are some of the things, right? So it could be very good, very impactful, very innovative. But if you don't have funding, you don't have product market fit, you don't have the right business model, then you will not be able to scale.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that, Wilfred. And I think that's such a key point for our innovator audience members to think about is, it goes well beyond just having an innovation that may be, in your case, healthcare, medically very important, or from a healthcare perspective, very new and impactful. You have to have that business model. You have to have the operations, whether that's marketing, sales, delivery, and so on and so forth, that support your service or product in order to be successful, right? So it's much more than just, I have a great idea and my idea is medically sound and it's going to work from a healthcare perspective. It just goes beyond that. And I think so often we see innovators who feel discouraged because they have a wonderful idea but aren't able necessarily to put together some of these other aspects. And that's why, again, partnering with others, whether that's being co-founding with founding team members or things of that sort, can be so important. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the support. Vilgro Africa is an incubator, as you said, and in some cases you are investing money, cash, into the enterprises that you work with. But in all cases, you're providing non-cash assistance and non-cash support. Can you talk about what types of support you offer, and over the 5-6 years now that you've been operating, which types of support have you found to be, let's say, more successful, or maybe another way to put it is more required by the innovators that you've worked with because they either don't have the background or the knowledge or the skill set? And if you can give specific examples, please feel free to.
Yeah, I think where we've seen a lot of value is for these product-based companies. These people are building tangible hardware products that will be applied to a neonate or a newborn. Those ones, because even in an ecosystem, those are like trailblazers. We as a continent, we don't produce locally many of these products, hardware products. Very few devices are made here. And we learned that even during COVID, where we couldn't get enough ventilators. Even PPEs, we just started making those, thankfully, because of COVID. So as an ecosystem, because that's a less trodden path, that means the few that apply need so much more support because they are the first, among the first to try this, right? So regulatory is the biggest, like the regulatory roadmap is one of the biggest value adds. And you can remember in Addis, we presented during DevEx the regulatory roadmap for almost all the 4 or 5 East Africa countries. We've mapped that end to end. So we know the process for Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia. If you're building a new product, this is where you start. And we help them with a clinical study design, identifying a PI, going through the study itself. Then from there, if the study checks out, then how do you now go into the device registration, which is our other process. And it's very long and very laborious and tiresome. So we work alongside them, helping them, reviewing those study protocols, sometimes writing up the protocols for them and doing the study design. And that's just regulatory, right? Then the product itself, building the product itself, how do you design the product? How do you do your user requirements gathering? How do you do your validation, your verification, all the way to design transfer? And we see companies really appreciate that value. I'll give you an example of a company in Uganda called Mcopa that is coming up with a way to easily, quickly diagnose pneumonia in children under 5. Because most of the time, you show up with a child and they have fever and they're coughing. No questions asked, clinicians are likely to prescribe antibiotics for pneumonia. Yeah, because no one wants to take the risk, and also the tests they're not that's readily available. So they will do just a clinical diagnosis by just looking at the vitals. So we end up prescribing antibiotics, which then leads to another problem of resistance, drug resistance. As they grow, then they'll need even more strong antibiotics, which is it's a vicious cycle. It's a knock-off effect that can affect generations to come. So we said, how can we do this? Can you come up with a product that doesn't require a high skill set? That means it has a bit of AI, machine learning. It can quickly interpret and give you instant results. You don't need to be very skilled. And it's a screening tool, right? It's not a diagnostic, it's a screening, but then it can quickly rule out the false positives for pneumonia, right? You can quickly rule out that this is not a pneumonia case, just get this out of the queue. And for you're only left to focus on a few of the patients. So we help them with the design and even taking that, even paired them with a design company in India to continue helping them with that and transferring that design back, and then continually going with them to even validate with the users and the customers. And it's an iterative process, right? It doesn't happen overnight. It's a multi-year process before they achieve that target product profile. So those are two examples I'll give, and as you can see, those are leaning very, very much towards hardware, medical devices. But then for service-based companies like clinics, we have a mobile company that does mobile clinic in our portfolio. We have another one that does is a digital pathologist platform where pathologists can log in and look at the images that were uploaded and give interpretations. These kind of service-based ones, the best value we give them is, one is mentorship. You pair them with someone who has scaled a similar business, even in a different sector, right? So if you're doing, for example, mobile clinic, you get a lot of value from working with someone who has built a company in a logistics space in another sector, right? Because they will help you with the route planning and all these things. So mentorship is another one. Then the other one is those go-to-market partnerships I mentioned earlier. How do you help them, introduce them to these large networks for B2B, B2G, or B2N for NGOs that will open up wide opportunity that they couldn't do on their own. Yeah.
That's great. So really helpful. So just to quickly summarize for our audience there, kind of the key points you said in terms of what types of technical support you've been able to successfully offer in the past. There's one is understanding, and I'm going to use my words here, it's a little bit different than yours, but understanding the ecosystem in terms of regulation, legal aspects. There was that example that you gave. A second example you gave was helping the innovator with the actual product design, the actual technical product design, right? And making sure that it, not only was it technically going to work, but was it in a form factor that might be more acceptable to the marketplace? And of course, from a cost perspective, can it be made economically so that the price point is viable and it's generating sufficient profit back to the company? And then as you said, again, there's of course, there's the aspect of partnerships, go to market. And I know you didn't say it in this case, but I know that you offer it, is of course just the general business understanding. Most of the innovators you're working with are first-time founders. They are not experienced business people. Often they're coming from either academics or they're coming maybe from a medical background, and this is their first time working in the business world. So helping them just understand some of those business aspects as well, I know, is something that you've been able to offer many of the innovators that you've worked with, at least the ones that I've interacted with that have overlapped with your portfolio. So that's very helpful as well.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, and as you're speaking, you reminded me another one. So I focus more on the hardcore tech side of it. I forgot the business side of it, right? So business modeling, business validation, unit economics, pricing, all these are the things we offer. And most importantly, investment readiness, right? We know that our money will never be enough to take you to market. We give you only up to some $50,000. That's barely nothing. So we need you to unlock follow-on funding over and above what we give you in the millions of dollars. So one of the key, it should have been number one on my list, investment readiness support, right? Financial modeling, looking at your decks and teasers, preparing them. Sometimes we organize the investor showcase. We've done quite a number this year where we see which companies need help fundraising, we prep them, get their decks ready, introduce them to investors or take them to a showcase and support them in that transaction. So that's very key for any incubator. At least if you don't give anything else, you should be able to offer investment readiness support.
That's great, and thank you for highlighting that. Of course, as someone who, aside from We Scale Impact, also does investments in the early stage seed space, I would say, yes, investment readiness is critical, but by definition, it tends to also encompass product design, business model, and all those other things, because an investor won't invest just because you have a beautiful slide deck, right? You have to have a viable business behind it, a viable idea, whether it's product or service, doesn't matter. And so all of those other aspects of support you're mentioning, in essence, feed the investment readiness, or put another way, the investment readiness as you've defined it, which is preparing their pitch decks, preparing their presentation, getting them ready, and so on and so forth, is not unto itself sufficient to get investment. You do need actual product or service, and you do need some amount of traction to be able to show that you either have success, or at least there is the likelihood, the expectation of future success. And I think that's important to remember as well. But that's a great point. Can you comment a bit on, I know you've been going, as you said, 5-6 years now, how successful have your cohorts or your graduates, as you call them, been in terms of attracting follow-on investment? Is that something you track? And if you can, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's something we track month on month, as I said. And last time I checked, we were at $18 million unlocked.
Okay.
We've disbursed $1.2 million. It has unlocked 18x. That means $18 million leveraged. So that's quite a good number. And actually, when we think about it, then we even now are launching our own VC fund.
Okay.
Because it's like we've missed out. We had the first money in, or the first dibs on these companies. So if we had a fund that could give the next round of capital, 200,000 to maybe $500 million, then we'll be very happy now when we talk about that leverage, right? So we are doing a fund now to even give the next. It's like a relay where the incubator does a bit of early stage validation and all that, and then we are the ones that we are very confident about. We take them to the fund, and then this fund can also now exit to other follow-on funders. Yeah.
But just to be clear, not all of the businesses in the incubator will be guaranteed getting funding from the fund, right? There is still a screening and selection process.
Yeah. The fund has to make its own independent decision.
Got it.
Because they have to maximize their shareholders' value. And
sure.
So it's not guaranteed, but we'll keep feeding them with a pipeline.
And out of curiosity, will the fund consider companies that are not part of the Vilgro Africa incubator?
Absolutely. They will look at we'll be only one among the many pipeline sources. But then the good thing is that since it's our fund, we are able to know which are the good deals that are cooking and pass them to the fund, give them almost first right of refusal.
Sure.
Before we even take them to other investors.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I can see the obvious synergy both for Vilgro Africa, but also for the innovators, right? Being able to, again, it's not guaranteed, but being able to have an opportunity to at least get a meeting, get the opportunity to pitch to that fund, which I would think the opportunity to pitch is almost, again, maybe not guaranteed, but is highly likely for all of your graduates. Whether the fund takes them up or not and makes an investment, of course, will depend on the specifics in the situation. I understand that. And of course, there's no requirement that even if there is an investment offer made, a term sheet from the fund, the innovator is not obligated to take it if they find another fund outside that might be offering them terms they find more attractive, then I would imagine, they could go with that, right? So it is a truly market forces relationship when it comes to the fund. But yes, there's already at least some building relationship because of the existence of the organization, the innovator going through the incubator, right?
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Now, have you actually launched that fund, or is it still in formation at this point? And if it's been launched, have you made any investments?
It's still information. We are in the pilot stage, and
Okay.
we are looking at 2 deals actively in the Vilgro portfolio. We want to do 2 small deals. We have some money. The fund has some money to do 2 deals in this pilot stage. So we are actually, yesterday we were just looking at the term sheets, and we are likely to make some offers in the next 1 or 2 months. Yeah.
Great. That's good. Let's change tracks a little bit here and talk about, for those that want to apply to be considered to participate in the Vilgro Africa incubator, right? So innovators that are interested in getting into your incubator. And as you said, by definition, you're the first money in. So companies that have already taken, in your example, $500,000 in investment would not be eligible for the incubator because they're a little too far along, let's say. But for those that are interested in applying, one, can you give a rough estimate of how many applicants you get every year versus how many do you actually accept into the program? So let's start with that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So we did one call for, which was looking for AI innovations. That was a more Pan-Africa call. We got about 250 applications from about 33 countries.
Okay.
We only selected 13 of them.
Okay.
From 11 countries. So you can see the magnitude, 250 down to like a dozen.
Exactly.
And that was a call. But then we have an open door policy. Our website is accepting applications throughout the year. So the ones that apply in the regular, through the website, we keep getting, I would say in a year we get 100 to 150 applications. When we don't do any specific thematic call and we just sit and wait, we are likely to get 100 to 150 applications. From that one, we cannot take more than 10. We only take about 5 to 7 out of.
Okay.
So it's quite selective. That was not the case when we started 5 years ago. We had to struggle. We had to make some not so good investments because we were new. No one knew us. But then as what got out that Vilgro is doing a good work in incubation, but they are also even giving funding, substantial funding. We started getting a lot of very good applications. So it's very hard to decide who to select. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can imagine it. And those types of figures of 20 to 1, 30 to 1 between applicants and acceptances is something that I often see with funders, with incubators, and so on and so forth, because there is huge demand for the services and, of course, for the funding as well, yes, from the innovators. And you do have to be selective. And also, I think many innovators don't necessarily know what to expect in terms of what information should they be providing, and to what level of detail, but also what level of accomplishment or traction do they need to have to be considered viable. So maybe you can give an example or two of, without naming names, but an example or two of aspects of applications that you've seen and that you've decided not to accept, and why. So again, not naming any names, but was it lack of business model? Was it lack of actual proven solution? No, what are the things that are keeping people out of being accepted? And again, no names, just generally.
Yeah. I think to start off, you need to have the right team, right? You might be working on a good problem, but then we look at the skill sets. Is this team capable? If it's a doctor and they want to build a device, then the question is, do you have a biomedical engineer in your team? Do you have a business person? So the more multidisciplinary the team is, the better. This is something we call single founder risk. So if you're a single founder, already that gets flagged immediately as a risk. So you need at least 2-3 co-founders with complementary skill set, prior experience. We are not likely to support straight out of college founders. We like people who have a bit of experience. I mean, it's not that they'll be disqualified automatically. I mean, we might have 1 or 2 straight out of college founders, but that's not the norm. We like people with a bit of experience, especially because this is health. The other thing is sector fit. I think that's very easy to rule out. If you're not healthcare based, then you get disqualified right away. If it's for Vilgro Africa, I mean, other Vilgros might still work with you. The other thing is business model. Is this likely to get a business model? I mean, you can tell from the beginning if something has potential to actually have a business model, or people actually buy this product. Then this problem solution fit, product market fit, scalability. Now that we're talking about scale, you can easily tell how many people does the problem affect that you're trying to solve, right? If you're only solving, if this problem only affects 1,000 people in Kenya, then clearly there will be no scale. And we are not in the business of making luxurious goods and products. We want to touch masses. So
Right.
that would be another thing, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, those are all critical points. Let me ask a follow-up to that, which is, you said business model is one of the aspects you look at when screening applications. Do you feel that an applicant has to have a finalized business model when they're applying, or just that they have to be able to show the potential to get to a viable business model long term?
I think they just need to show potential, right? Our work is to work with you to get the business model, but you need to show potential. And we can look at similar models. When part of due diligence, we look at comparables, we look at, has there been a similar business in Nigeria or India or somewhere else that has scaled? So we can see there are these parameters that will tell us that there's potential for scale.
Yeah, that's great. And the reason I'm asking some of these questions is because some of our audience members may be interested in applying to Vilgro Africa. And I'd like them, of course, to be successful. And so by helping them understand what is going to potentially rule them out, assist them. But it also, of course, helps Vilgro Africa, because the honest truth is you want high quality applicants. It's not just a raw numbers game. You don't need more applicants. You want high quality applicants. I mean, you're already getting several hundred a year, and adding another 50 to 100 that are, let's say, moderate to low quality won't improve your program. It won't improve the intake of who you're helping. And so by helping the innovators to better understand what an incubator is looking for, in this case, Vilgro Africa, I think it helps them to be sharper about preparing their applications, and also helping them to focus on where should they be working to move forward toward getting ready for an incubator. Again, whether that's Vilgro Africa or someone else. And so that's why I'm asking some of these questions of you, is just to help the audience members better understand that. I see we're getting starting to come up a little bit tight on time here. I don't see any other questions from the audience at this time. So let me ask you, Wilfred, we've been talking a lot here about scale, impact, and what that means. And you clarified that impact to Vilgro Africa is all about touching lives and all about that aspect. And you are healthcare focused in Africa by definition. So let me ask you, maybe you can summarize in 3 to 5 points. What are the key things you'd like our innovators in the audience to take away? And then I'm going to ask you, I'll just prep you now, I'll ask you a follow-up, which is, what are the 3 to 5 points that you might want funders in the audience to take away as well? And I would imagine those points might be different. So let's start with points for the innovators. What are the 3 to 5 points you'd like them to take away from not just our conversation today, but broadly your experience, having worked with now many, many innovators, because I know that just the projects we've worked on, you've worked with 40, 50 innovators on those projects who were not part of the Vilgro incubator. You've done other work. So with all those innovators, what are the top things you want to let them know? And then we'll go to the top points for funders. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the first one is that not all problems are worth solving, right? So sometimes we get emotional because you had this experience, you walk to a clinic or a shop, and you had this experience, and you said, "This is a problem. I have to fix it." You have to go further and do some research and see, is it worth solving? How big is the problem? How big is the opportunity? Because entrepreneurship takes a while, right? No one, even people, average exits take about 3 to 5 years. So once you enter down that road, it's like 5 years of your career, which is a lot, and sometimes it can be even 10 years. And I've seen people that they, even with feedback, they ignore the feedback. They continue persisting when they should have pivoted or failed. We keep saying fail fast or fail forward. So keep pursuing something that was not solving from the beginning. And there you've wasted 5, 7, 10 years of your career, which is very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Because most entrepreneurs are coming in at the prime of their career, right? These are people in their, let's say, earliest late 20s all the way to 40s. So it's a very prime time of your life that you sometimes you're better off remaining an employee than trying to start your own business, right? So not every problem is worth solving. 2, there should be the right motive, right? People think that becoming an entrepreneur, you become your own boss, which is not true, right? You have other bosses like investors, board, customers. It's a sleepless night affair. So, you should carefully consider whether entrepreneurship is for you and whether you're solving the right a problem worth solving, right? The other thing should be, as I said, quickly, once you've launched, quickly iterate, make sure you're searching for that product market fit. Iteratively, spend the first 6 months, 1 year just searching. Once you don't scale, because we're talking about scale, don't scale if you don't have a product market fit, right? Also, don't scale if you don't have a full product, because as you keep searching for product market fit, you realize that your product also needs to step up, and sometimes you need to augment the product to have a more full offering, right? And once you have a full offering and a good product market fit and funding, then you are ready to scale. We've seen companies here, and I won't name, but I know one clinic that was doing very well, and when they raised $1 million, they went on this rampant scaling plan that killed them, right? They were scaling more than they could generate revenue or raise funding. So timing is everything, right? Know when is the right time to scale, when is the right time to just. And COVID taught us that, right? There is a time to keep your expenses low and just
Sure.
extend your runway. Yeah. So you have to know, you have to calculate when to press on the pedal and when to just take a step back. And then talent, make sure you're hiring people who are smarter than you always, right? So those are for the entrepreneurs.
It's great. Those are great points and great tips. Thank you very much. And now let's switch kind of tracks. What's the advice you'd give to funders? And especially now that you're launching a VC fund, you yourselves are becoming more traditional funders, right? Not just the incubator side, but the VC fund. So what's some advice you'd give to funders who are looking at this space?
Yeah, so I'll start with foundations and more public funders that especially those that are doing programs, and I shared this in another panel, that it's good to start with an end in mind, right? If you're going to do a call for innovation or a program in Africa or India, what's the end in mind? And is there a place? I think there's a place for people like WeScale Impact and people like Vilgro, all these technical assistance providers. We need to involve them early on, right? Not at the end. How can we get WeScale Impact involved in the program design from the very beginning? So they tell you, especially if you're trying to do an entrepreneurship intervention or a business model intervention. So we tell you what are the things you need, the components for the program, and where can we come in. Because most of the time they bring us at the end, right? They launch a program, then quick lessons from that program, and they see maybe something is not working. And now in a firefighting mode, we try to bring business service providers. So if I was a foundational donor, I would involve all these ecosystem players from the beginning if I'm doing a business model in entrepreneurship intervention. Then for more return-seeking investors, I would say that there's money to be made in Africa and other developing countries. We are the next frontier, and being the next frontier, that means that yes, you'll make a ton of money in Silicon Valley and other places, but there's opportunity to make money here while touching lives, changing lives. Here we solve problems worth solving, right? You can see direct impact to people's lives by any innovation being solved here, any innovation being built here. Uh, and the entrepreneurial DNA is there. We've seen unicorns. I think this year alone, 5 unicorns came from Africa. And we are increasingly getting this kind of investors making good exits here while solving real problems. Because again, we are also able to leapfrog as a continent, as you've seen with mobile money, microfinance. So yeah, you could have a very fulfilled life as an investor, working with the innovations in the part of the world. And we are looking for LPs to join the fund. So if you're any investor listening, happy to share more details on that offline. And yeah, I think that will be my parting shot.
That's great. Well, thanks, Wilfred. Really appreciate that, both for the innovators and for the funders. And I think some of those comments are, obviously resonate with me, having worked in the industry for many years, like you, having seen that and having seen some of those mistakes that others have made, whether innovator or funder. That yes, they can be in many cases corrected, but takes more effort, energy. But if you have the idea and the plan going in, and you understand where those limitations are and you use that advice, I think we can save a lot of people time, a lot of people effort, and definitely in some cases costs. So that's wonderful. Thank you for doing this. So I'd like to thank you for joining us today. This has been a great conversation with my guest, Wilfred Njagi from Vilgro Africa, the co-founder and CEO there. He's based in Nairobi, and as he indicated, they're an incubator focused on African healthcare, and now they're launching their own VC fund in the same space. I'd like to remind our audience that this will be recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel, the We Scale Impact YouTube channel, and that we have these conversations approximately monthly. Watch for our feed on LinkedIn, or you can just subscribe to our YouTube channel to be able to be aware of what's coming up next. And so with that, I want to thank our entire audience. Again, thank our guest, Wilfred Njagi from Vilgro Africa, for joining us today. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Thanks for having me.